This episode is brought to you by our friends at Betterman. You can check them out at betterman.com. That is betterman.com. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Clearly, your friendly neighborhood. Jimmy and Kelly Needham here. Kelly, say hi.
Hello.
And that's Kelly.
Yes.
I
am here, even though I never show up at the beginning of episodes because you have enough personality for the both of us.
That, every time you say it, it always cuts so deep. We talk at the beginning of an episode, the middle, and at the end. It turns out that's how episodes work. And at the end of the episodes, typically we are giving you info that we think would be helpful, cool, interesting. And one of those things is that if you don't know this, we filmed this whole thing before a live audience. Like right now, I'm looking at human beings' faces, and they are smiling. One of them has their mouth open, and we do this together. And at the end of these episodes, we do Q&A and like go, hey, that was weird when you said that. What does that mean? And then I get to apologize to them, and it's wonderful. It's fantastic. So say we got them right here. Say some of you guys say hi. Turn on the say hi. Hello. Hey. Okay. Underwhelming, but they are there. Okay, and that's what's important. They're there. Now. I just wanted to say that because if you wanted to be a part of that crew, what do they got to do, Kel? Say it.
Go to patreon.com and search Jimmy and Kelly Needham, and you will find us, and you can join our team, and be a part of the live Clearly audience.
Little as $5 a month, I think we got it.
Yep.
So that would be awesome.
Helps us make this podcast, make it possible, and then you get to be a part of it in more than one way by helping shape the content by being a live audience member and asking questions. And sometimes those answers to your questions end up on the podcast.
Facts on facts on stacks.
Where's our
wheel of ancient
wheel?
Destiny? Here we go.
Okay, can I do it? Ready? Hey, they've got to have number 10.
10. Okay.
You opening it?
I am.
We
got them in colored envelopes today.
How nervous are you?
Honestly, I feel a little angsty just in general.
Yes, I'm Mr. Brightside.
I'm a little bit on edge today, so it'll be good. It'll make for some fun content. Here we go. I don't know, what does it say? What does it say? Actually, I don't know what that says. My daughter wrote that. Oh gosh. Nahum chapter 1.
Nahum chapter 1. Does anybody know where the book of Nahum is in your Bible?
Nahum. Habakkuk. So it's before Habakkuk, because I got the song in my head.
Oh, yes.
Nahum 1.
Sing all your, Bible drill songs that help you memorize all the minor prophets.
We are in Nahum 1, and some of y'all don't even know what's coming for you. It is speeding your way like a freight train, and you don't even know. You're still on the tracks. You're picking there's a daisy on the track. You're picking it. This is so fun. And then Nahum 1 shows up to your face. Shall we? Shall I? Shall you?
Yeah.
The Oracle of Nineveh, the book of the vision of Nahum the Elkoshite. A jealous and avenging God is the Lord. The Lord is avenging and wrathful. The Lord takes vengeance on his adversaries, and he reserves wrath for his enemies. The Lord is slow to anger and great in power. And the Lord will by no means leave the guilty unpunished. In a whirlwind and storm is his way, and clouds are the dust beneath his feet. He rebukes the sea and it makes it dry. He dries up all the rivers. Bashan and Carmel wither. The blossoms of Lebanon wither. Mountains quake because of him, and the hills dissolve. Indeed, the earth is upheaved by his presence, the world and all the inhabitants in it. Who can stand before his indignation? Who can endure the burning of his anger? His wrath is poured out like fire, and the rocks are broken up by him. The Lord is good, a stronghold in the day of trouble, and he knows those who take refuge in him. But with an overflowing flood, he will make a complete end of its sight and will pursue his enemies into darkness.
Can I just say what is initially sticking out as the obvious what? This was the passage that sounded strange to my ear. Is that an okay place to start in our
Yeah.
conversation? Because you were reading that.
I shut my Bible for some reason.
I
Hold
don't
on.
know why you did that.
I had it memorized, so I just thought, I don't need to look at it.
This book, this prophetic message opens with a lot of anger, is the words, right? A lot of things that don't hit our ears, like patience or grace, right? Vengeance, wrath, vengeance. I underlined those as you're reading.
Yep.
Verse 2. Verse 6, who can withstand his indignation? Who can endure his burning anger? His wrath is poured out like water. So all of that is ringing of anger. And then verse 3 felt so out of place. The Lord is like, right after, he is furious with his enemies.
Mm-hmm.
The Lord is slow to anger, but great in power. The Lord will never leave the guilty unpunished. So that phrase, the Lord is slow to anger, just kind of to my ear as you were reading, rose above as like feels out of place.
Which is a great thing to notice.
Yes.
Again, one of the first things you are to do when you're studying the Bible is just go, I'm just going to observe the text. I'm going to notice what's here. And it is always good. We talked about this a few episodes ago. It's always good to just identify the things that stick out. Notice everything, but especially the things that hit you sideways or that feel confusing given the surrounding context. All of those things are typically where sort of like the energy of the text is, and one of the things that makes the scriptures compelling. So be sure to identify them.
Right. Well, that's why I brought it up, because that has been a part of my Bible studies. Like when something feels out of place, I'm like, that is interesting. I'm going to linger over that. I just think we tend to not see those things. Okay, let me say it a different way. I think our modern ear, when we hear the Lord is slow to anger, what we hear is God has no anger.
Yeah, that's good.
And obviously that's not true, because he's both slow to anger and yet is furious at his enemies. So he has wrath, but he is slow to it.
Yeah.
So to be slow to anger doesn't mean there is no anger.
Yeah.
And there...
So, and actually, if you just kind of follow the logic of that, if the Lord is wrathful, angry in this text, and he's also slow to anger, it follows that it's been a while brewing. That whatever he's feeling now, it's taken him a while to get there.
Yep.
So that is something interesting to hold on to. And then especially when we start looking at the text and kind of setting it in its context, what's going on? What's the background here? So can we do that?
Yeah.
So we're in verse 1 now. It says an oracle, and it's going to say...
Or pronouncement, another translation.
And then it says of Nineveh. So this...
Which makes you think of our man Jonah.
Yeah, so this letter is written to the city of Nineveh, which was the capital of Assyria, which was an antagonist to the people of God in the Old Testament, the Israelites. And this letter is actually very unusual. It's weird and unusual for lots of reasons, but one of them is there's not many prophetic literature that's written to anybody but Judah and Israel. Now, they may say throughout it, and now I want to say something to Egypt, now I want to say something to Cush or whatever. But this letter opens with, hey, this is a letter for a foreign nation.
Which is crazy. Is this the only instance of that? Do you happen to know offhand?
I don't know offhand, but I'm leaning toward yes.
Yeah, I can't think offhand of another one. Now, yeah, like you said, all the prophets do address other nations, but their primary audience is
generally
Israelites.
Yeah, and so that's the standout feature, Nineveh. And you should come with most of us come with some working knowledge of Nineveh. You were right, Kelly, to say, okay, so we're talking about a place that shows up in another book of the Bible, and that is the book of Jonah. And I do think it's interesting, and this is what makes, I think, the force of Nahum so compelling, is what was the flavor, what was the spirit of the book of Jonah? If you guys remember, Jonah was a prophet of the Lord who was told to go to the Ninevites and to declare that judgment was coming unless they repented, and then they repented.
Right.
So the book of Jonah was really a peace offering. It was a mercy act of God to this pagan nation, really wicked people.
Right, which is why Jonah's upset about it.
Yeah.
He
Jonah
doesn't
actually
want them to have mercy.
doesn't want God to do the thing that God so often does, which is to extend mercy. But he does in the book, and then Jonah gets all upset. And go watch VeggieTales, you'll figure it out.
Right.
But the point is, the tone of Jonah is mercy being extended to a foreign people.
Mm-hmm.
And Nahum is written about 100 years after the book of Jonah is written.
Right.
And
That's what I was just looking up.
Yep. And it's interesting how the tables have turned, how the mood has shifted, right? So if all you knew was Jonah, the book of Jonah, and now you're Nahum, and Nahum opens with, God is a God of vengeance and wrath. He pours out wrath on his enemies.
He will completely destroy Nineveh.
Something has happened. Something's happened to the people of Nineveh. There was a moment of repentance, but we can sort of deduce it must not have stuck around, because here the Lord is back talking to Nineveh, but he's got a very different tone this time. This episode is brought to you by our friends at Better Man. What is the most trusted voice in the life of a man today? It's Better Man. Better Man is more than a resource, it's a movement. Everyone agrees that when men are better, the world is better. Better Man, it gives men the language and the license they need to be all that God has called them to be. When men are at their best, listen, marriages thrive, children are blessed, the church is strengthened, the world changes. So let's change the world. Check them out today at betterman.com. That's betterman.com.
These are passages, and one of the reasons I think it maybe have been turned in, or one, for this season, is like, well, how do I handle a passage that's proclaiming God's wrath and vengeance and complete destruction that's not written to me? What do I do with that? When I come across these passages, and just a few things that I just want to share that I find amazing and encouraging and lovely and beautiful, which you might be like, what? That all in Nahum 1? Yes. The descriptions of God in passages like these, though they're right now being written to Nineveh about something very difficult and not lovely, right? Anger and punishment and wrath, are still amazing descriptions of God for us to meditate on. The clouds are the dust beneath his feet. I'll never forget reading Nahum 1 for the first time, with actually trying to pay attention to it. And the whole day, I remember driving around doing errands, and I'm watching the clouds in the air and just thinking about, oh, that's like little puffs of dust from his feet. That's how big my God is. Wow. Like just that phrase. Or that the mountains quake before him, the whole earth just trembles at his presence. That his very presence is so profoundly solid and substantial that the earth trembles at it. I mean, this is a God we can't see, taste, or hear or feel right now. Our senses, we don't have a sense of him. And so it can be hard to feel like, how real are you, God? These passages remind me, no, he is solid and true and real. So there are really amazing descriptions of God that I think are good for us to meditate on and take comfort in, because ultimately we'll see, right? He cares for, he knows those who take refuge in him. He is a safe God for those who take refuge in him. And that means all of his power, strength, and might and fury is something to marvel at in a comforting way. So that's one thing that I would say about this. But another is, I actually find the longer that I live, the more evil I have seen done to me or others, the more counseling sessions I've been in and heard about just terrible things happening to people. I feel so thankful that there's wrath in God. It is a good thing that God cares enough to not to not just say, yeah, it's fine. He doesn't sweep things under the rug. He is slow to anger. But it is a good thing that God cares about sin, and he cares about things that are wrong and broken, that he has a sense that this is something that matters and it's wrong and I'm not okay with it and I will do something about it.
That's right.
That I think is something to be thankful for.
Yes. It would be inappropriate if God was not wrathful given the world that we experience. Because all of us, I mean, you don't have to be a Christian. You just have to have eyeballs. Like all of us, you can look around and go, this there is dysfunction in this place. There's brokenness, there's sin, there's corruption, there's war, there's strife. People wrong each other constantly. I mean, just click on any news app for 3 seconds and you're there. And if that's the world we find ourselves in, and we really have a God who is not just slow to anger, but absent of anger, what we're really saying, and this is sadly what our culture, I think, subconsciously wants in a deity, is there's a God who isn't just, who doesn't care about justice, who doesn't care about making things right and new and good, and that's not our God. That's not our God. It is so. Kelly, you're right to go. The sentence "God is wrathful" or "God takes vengeance" or "God is angry" to the modern ear is kind of gross.
Right.
But if you'll pause for like 13 seconds and actually think about it, you don't want a God who's not
right.
Wrathful. You don't.
Right.
You. This is actually exactly the God you would hope for, given the brokenness of our world.
Right.
Another thing I want to add, and I'd love to hear you interact with this, is I think one of the things that we miss, the wrathfulness of God is not an eternal attribute. It's not something that existed in eternity past, because there was no wrath to be poured out. Wrath is a byproduct of the broken created order. And but one thing that we do know is eternal of God, and it's actually the motivator for his wrath, if you can believe it, is God's love. It is. I remember years and years ago, it was one of my first sermons. I actually preached this text. Which, why did I pick Nahum 1 to preach? But because I'm me. But I remember we kind of landed the plane talking about that for God to be wrathful, for God to be angry at something, for God to hate something, it can only be because he loves something else more. And I was actually studying Isaiah not too long ago, and I came across this passage that I think is a helpful cross-reference to just give you, this isn't like the only place you could go to talk about it, but this gave me some language to go, okay, I see, here's an example of what I'm talking about. So Isaiah 61 verse 8, it says, "For I, the Lord, love justice." So that's line 1. Here's the next line of it. "I hate robbery in the burnt offering." So I, the Lord, love justice. You don't expect the next sentence to be, "I hate." But it follows logically if that justice is being undermined by robbery in the burnt offering. So he goes, hey, because I love this thing supremely, I actually hate the things that oppose it. And we actually understand this, right? Like I love babies, so I hate abortion, right? I love the diversity God bakes into the world, and so I hate racism. Like this is how we operate. But I do think it's just helpful to go, God's wrath is not like some embarrassing attribute of him. It's actually what God's love does when it meets something that opposes the thing he loves.
Right.
Is that fair?
Totally. It is a good thing. And there's a great book on anger that is called Good and Angry. You should go read it. But he, in this book, is talking about the emotion of anger and references God's wrath and all of the passages. I mean, there's so many, so much of our Old Testament and New Testament has expressions of wrath in God. And he says, God has put his anger on display for all of us. It is so pure and righteous and holy, such a righteous expression of anger, rightly motivated by the love of true and good things, that it's like God's not ashamed of it. It's in his word. It's an invitation. Come investigate my anger and see for yourself what is motivating it, what's behind it. God is not embarrassed about it. We don't need to be either. We just need to come curious sometimes. And because it does hit our ears differently sometimes based on the cultural context that we're in. Can we read the rest of it? Because I was kind of glancing ahead at some things that I wanted to talk about.
Go ahead.
The rest of Nahum 1 says this: Whatever you plot against the Lord, he will bring it to complete destruction. Oppression will not rise up a second time, for they will be consumed like entangled thorns, like the drink of a drunkard, and like the straw that is fully dry. One has gone out from you who plots evil against the Lord and is a wicked counselor. This is what the Lord says. Though they are strong and numerous, they will still be mowed down, and he will pass away. Though I have punished you, I will punish you no longer, for I will now break off his yoke from you and tear off your shackles. The Lord has issued an order concerning you. There will be no offspring to carry on your name. I will eliminate the carved idol and cast image from the house of your gods, and I will prepare your grave, for you are contemptible. Look to the mountains, the feet of the herald who proclaims peace. Celebrate your festivals, Judah. Fulfill your vows, for the wicked one will never again march through you. He will be entirely wiped out. I wanted to read that because some of what we've just been talking about, you kind of see it show up in the latter half of this chapter, that there's a mention here of Judah, of the Israelites, who, if
are
I'm
being
reading,
oppressed by Assyria. Yeah.
Right. It's like, if you know the historical context and even reading through lines here, it's like, obviously, they have been experiencing the wickedness of this foreign nation. So it's like that God is speaking to that and saying, I'm going to do something about it. Which, what do people say in suffering? I've heard it a lot. I've said it. It's in my own journal entries. God, where were you? Or God, where are you? What are you doing? Do you care that this happened, that happened, that this terrible thing happened at the hands of someone else? Where's the Lord? That's kind of what rises up. If God were here, he wouldn't let it happen. If he cared, he would do something. And this is a passage where God's going, I see, and I'm doing something about it.
It's like Exodus.
Yes, yeah, the response to the Israelites, and they're crying out to him. And I think it is just as a reminder of what passages, they really are meant to be a comfort.
I'm glad you said that, because that does help frame the opening of Nahum. If you just read that in isolation, you may be like, man, is my God just a meanie? But it's like, no, he is the defender of the afflicted. He's the defender of the oppressed. And so if you think about it, all of us actually love wrath. We're like, we are pro God's wrath fundamentally. We just don't like it when it's directed at us. But when you read Nahum 1 and you come to the end of it, you're like, oh, God's actually helping to liberate an oppressed people, namely the people of Judah. And so the assailants, Nineveh, they have it coming. They have done wickedness to him. It's like all of that's what what's the movie The Avengers about? It's all of it is just this. It's like bad guys doing bad stuff. Now there's a hero that's gonna, it's in us to love this attribute of God, actually, if we can see it properly.
There's something else too that I see in this that has to do with that wrath. We love the wrath, but it's the Lord who is wrathful, not Judah. Like the Lord is expressing his wrath about their
He's
oppression.
the avenger.
He's the avenger, not them.
Take that, Tony Stark.
When he speaks to the people of Judah, what does he tell them to do? I think this is so interesting. He tells them to look, celebrate, and fulfill. Those are the three verbs addressed to Judah. Look to the mountains, to the feet of the herald who proclaim peace. Celebrate your festivals, Judah. Like, go to church. That's kind of the spirit of that, right? Fulfill your vows. What an interesting thing. If you are the oppressed person, God is saying, I'm going to do something about it. I'm coming. I will do something about it. In the meantime, you continue to set your eyes on me. Look expectantly toward me doing something. I will do something. Watch and wait. And in the meantime, continue to worship me.
That's right.
It reminds me of in Romans, where isn't it Romans where vengeance is the Lord's, right? It's not ours. That we are called to let God do that work and not us. And we are called to continue to set our affection on him, our hope on him, and to wait on him, which is really hard to do when you can't see him and you can't hear him.
Yep.
And so here this prophet is speaking out, and what a comfort it would be to an oppressed people to hear that God does take vengeance. He is slow to anger, but he still will not leave the guilty unpunished.
Yeah.
Now, we love it until it's directed at us.
Well, and that's where I was going to want to maybe land somewhere here. When I'm reading this, kind of two things. I felt like there's something haunting about this text, and then there's something hopeful about this text for me. And you mentioned the haunting part. Verse 3 is really the thing that should haunt all of us. The Lord's slow to anger and great in power, and the Lord will by no means leave the guilty unpunished. That's everybody. Yeah. That's the thing that we forget. It's like, and if you have spurned him, we are all guilty before God. So to think that through, it's like, so God will by no means leave my sin unpunished. Like the things that I have done he will absolutely pour his wrath out on them. That is a haunting prospect, and you should sit in that. It's right for you to feel your way through that sentence. That's haunting. But there's this hopeful piece that's, again, even in Nahum, coursing through it. And you see a glimpse of it in verse 8 and other places. But verse 8 says this, but with an overflowing flood, he will make a complete... Nope, I'm sorry. I lied. Verse 7. The Lord is good, a stronghold in the day of trouble, and he knows those who take refuge in him. So here's the bit of hope. God is pouring out his wrath on every guilty person, and yet there is a refuge to be had in him that will protect you from his wrath. There's a way out. There's a way out. And this is huge. And I think it's interesting that the very God who has the wrath is the very God who says, I'm the shelter from the wrath. Right. He's the God of vengeance, and yet he's also the one who we take refuge in. Isn't that interesting? We are saved from God's we are saved from God, by God, through God, right? That's how we are protected and saved. God is the shelter and he's the storm. Isn't that amazing? What an unbelievable thought. And we get a bright, vivid Technicolor view of this when we make it over to the New Testament, because the New Testament gets really clear about in what way we take refuge in him. So I was thinking about Romans 5, and I just want to say this. So Romans 5, Paul is writing, and he says, much more than having now been justified by his blood, we shall be saved from the wrath of God through him. So through Jesus, I'm rescued from God's wrath. Jesus, by the way, is God. So God rescues me from God's wrath by taking God's wrath for me. And it's the only way that you can finish reading Nahum 1 and smile. It's the only way we're going to come out of it, not just dismal. Right. And it's beautiful.
But I love that even in the Old Testament, there are these beautiful hints and little tiny proclamations of a future coming solution being made for those who will take refuge in him.
That's right.
That he is gonna make provision for us, and he did in Christ.
Yeah.
Jimmy, true or false?
True.
You don't even know what the question was.
It's probably true.
You have preached a sermon on
true.
Nahum 1.
I have.
Nahum chapter 1, one of your first.
One of my first, when I was a little infant.
Not when you're an infant. But we will link that in the show notes because
I'm scared now. I haven't seen that.
It was a great sermon.
Oh, you're just saying that.
I'm just saying I remember it. So that's fun. And it was fun to talk about Nahum with you right now. So.
Speaking of show notes, we want you to take your pretty little eyes and look on down at the show notes. I couldn't have made that any weirder because we would love for you to, one, subscribe to the podcast, share it with a friend, and two, in the show notes, there is a place for you to join our email list where you get updates, all the latest things that we got going on, new seasons of Clearly we got coming up. You'll be the first to know. And then lastly, if you want to help us keep moving this boat down the river, I don't know, I was groping for an analogy. You can become a Patreon partner with us for as little as $5 a month. You can help us make this podcast and so much more happen. And you get to be a live audience member when you do that. And I think that's pretty cool. So,
Yep.
okay, those are the ends of the words that I wanted to say.
Yep. We'll see you next time.